Hello and welcome back to the UCLA Bruins Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Ferguson, writer for UCLA on SI. Today we're going to be comparing hot takes or overreactions to what the actual reality of it is, giving the more boring explanation to some of these questions that were prompted after UCLA's 30-point loss to Michigan. Obviously, that's not the loss you want, especially if you are in the Big Ten, where you know it's going to be a dogfight no matter what. But before we get started, I want to thank everyone right now who's listening, Apple Music, Spotify, or even YouTube. It all means a lot to me. And yeah, I really cannot thank you enough. But let's get right into it. So the first hot take that I've kind of identified is that Booker should be benched for the remainder of the season. Obviously, he had a really poor performance against number 2 Michigan. He went 1 for 6. He took a lot of shots away from some of UCLA's starters. Bilodeau, Dent, Perry, even Sky Clark at some point. He was taking more shots than he needed to, and that in turn really halted any of UCLA's offensive momentum. Bilodeau would hit a 3, and then it'd follow up by a Booker miss, and that simply cannot happen moving forward. I know this is obviously Cronin did name names, but he said in his post-game brief that players need to learn how to pass the ball more. And obviously that could have been Booker, especially when you look at the box score. You start to see an issue kind of going with how Booker performed against Michigan. But honestly, when you look at everything, I think it makes sense. Again, hot take. I mean, there's obviously going to be a reality following it. But when you look at UCLA's roster now, Sky Clark is back. And before Sky Clark got injured, UCLA was running a lot of that 3-guard look. And what I mean by that is we saw a lot of Dent, Perry, and then obviously Sky Clark in the lineup, then followed up by Bilodeau and Daly kind of in the front court. That is something that could see itself in the future. Obviously, UCLA probably doesn't want to mix up their lineup that much and kind of have to relearn offenses and looks, but it might be the case, especially, given their poor performance against Michigan. The regular vanilla lineup with Booker at center did work out for UCLA for the most part. I mean, they were pretty good when Sky Clark was down with injury, but still, I don't see Booker playing substantial minutes. I don't think he'll be benched, and that's kind of where the reality kind of kicks in. Booker has played good minutes. Obviously, against Rutgers, he went 10 for 11. If he could start off a game hot like that and really prove to Cronin that he deserves to be, on the court, and we know how Cronin kind of, looks at players during the games. If you're not giving enough effort, obviously he's going to take you out right away, and you're not going to see the court for the remainder of the game. But if Booker can prove to play hard, I do see him playing decent minutes. Obviously, it's going to be less than what he was playing before, but that's just kind of the matter of fact when you look at how Cronin operates his teams. Again, I think UCLA might be better with the 3-guard look, especially with how good Sky Clark played. 8 points in 16 minutes. He went 2 for 3 from the 3-point line. Again, it would have been nice to see him take a lot of shots, but that's kind of where Booker came in to kind of take those away from him. But in the future, I see Booker playing still at least 10 minutes a game. I don't think he'll be benched. He'll still be in the starting lineup. Obviously, you want that 6'11" dude taking your tip-offs to start the game. And I think Booker fits that criteria. He just needs to show more effort, be more pass-heavy, because he could be a really good player. Look at Ade Mara of Michigan. Obviously, he's a very pass-first guy, and he has all the tools to be a good scorer. I mean, he's 7'3". Obviously, he's going to score at will if he wants to, but that's where he kind of, shows his facilitating. And I think that's something Booker should look at and kind of want to replicate. I think having a facilitating center is a great thing, especially when you look at what UCLA has building. Obviously, I think Trent Perry, Bilodeau, and Sky Clark are top 3 in the Big Ten for 3-point shooting. Obviously, you're going to want to give them the ball a lot more moving forward. But that kind of wraps up things for the Xavier Booker section. Next one is Mick Cronin should be fired. Obviously, on this podcast, we have kind of talked about this, concept of Mick Cronin not being the coach. Obviously, a 30-point loss in the Big Ten, no matter who it is against, is going to make you kind of look a lot less, imposing. We saw Mick Cronin get outcoached bad against Michigan. Obviously, UCLA was able to keep it within 2 by halftime, but then in the second half, UCLA scored 18 points, and that's where Michigan really blew the doors open and was able to outscore UCLA by 28 points to end the game. So just that's an example of why, Cronin's ways are starting to kind of, stumble and not really be as effective as they were before. He's the defensive-minded coach, but if you're not being a defensive, coach, like if it's not showing up in the box score or the scoreboard, questions are going to be made. And obviously personnel is a big issue. Obviously UCLA has a lot of scorers and number one options, so there's a lot of fighting over each other. But that's where Cronin needs to be a better coach in that way. He's taken accountability for all of UCLA's lapses this season, and I think this is just another example of it. But the reality when you look at Mick Cronin, if UCLA were to fire him on April 1st, he signed a 2-year extension, so he'll be playing, or he would be the coach if not fired until the 2029 to 2030 season. So that is still kind of a ways away. So if UCLA was to fire him, they would owe Mick Cronin $22.5 million. And that might be too much money for UCLA to stomach at this point. Obviously, they're wanting to build up their football program and some of their basketball program with NIL, stuff like that. But that's just not possible if you kind of fire Mick Cronin. $22 million is a very high number, especially in this league where every dime is going to be needed to improve your team. Is it worth it? Obviously, Mick Cronin has a great resume. He's coached some great UCLA teams, but right now what we're seeing is Mick Cronin has struggled, and I think if he ends the season off strong, he could stay. But again, the reality is $22.5 million is just too much to stomach for UCLA right now. That is hard to kind of bounce back off of, and obviously you're going to have to, choke up another, how many $1 million for the next coach. And that's going to be very hard for UCLA to want to sacrifice. But honestly, the performance on the court is simply not there, and something needs to change. If that's, hitting the transfer portal a lot better. I know Mick Cronin kind of messed up the transfer portal last season. And that's kind of why we're seeing some of this, some of these faults that are happening this season. I don't want to name names, but there's a few players who have really struggled and not really met their billing. But still, Mick Cronin needs to be a better recruiter, and he needs to prove why he deserves this job. And obviously that figure will kind of decrease. Obviously in 2027, if he is fired, UCLA will only have to owe him $18 million, 28, 13.5, 29, $9 million, and then April 1st, 30 or $4.5 million. So UCLA might be better off just waiting for that, obviously, but UCLA wants to, be that powerhouse in the Big Ten. And after a loss against Michigan, it is clear that there's a long ways for the Bruins to go until they're at that level. And I think that could start with Mick Cronin getting fired, but still, UCLA just does not have the money right now, or I feel, to really justify giving Cronin $22.5 million. And like I said, he's a historic coach. I think UCLA's best bet right now is, if he finds another job, which again is possible if things are not working out. I could see Mick Cronin leaving, but I don't know if there's any big programs who wants Mick Cronin right now, especially after this season, who will be willing to pay. I think it's $15 million a buyout if he was to find a new job. But again, that kind of wraps up the Mick Cronin section. It'll be interesting to see what they do with him. But yeah, the last overreaction is UCLA will now miss the tournament. After a 30-point loss like that and the hard schedule they have up on the road, Michigan State on Tuesday, followed up by, I think, number 8, Illinois. It's going to be hard for UCLA to really, get things going. I think they have Nebraska to also end up the season, but still, it's going to be hard for UCLA. That mental factor is really going to play a part in UCLA missing the tournament if they do, because right now they don't look like a tournament team. No matter what, if you lose by 30 points, what does that look like against NC State, who is UCLA's projected opponent right now? UCLA is still a team on the fringe, so that could be difficult for UCLA to kind of build up. A loss like this probably takes them down a lot, especially 30 points. I mean, that looks bad on paper, no matter what angle you take. Again, it was against a Big Ten opponent, so someone in your conference who you should be able to go toe-to-toe with, but it was clear that UCLA was unable to do that. So again, it's going to be interesting to see how UCLA not finishes off this season. But still, as it stands right now, if UCLA is unable to dust itself back off, I don't think they make the tournament. But the reality to this is that UCLA has plenty of opportunities to kind of rebuild that resume. If Purdue decides to go on a little run to end the season, I think that win will mean more. Obviously, we haven't really seen that, but still, the Bruins really need to kind of kick things in gear. If they beat Michigan State, I think that helps their stock. Any of the ranked wins or any of the ranked games down the stretch will be huge in determining if UCLA can make the tournament. If they lose the season out, I don't think it's possible. They might pick up a win against Minnesota or USC twice, but still, those are really hard games for the Bruins. And after this performance, I don't know if they have enough to kind of take down those teams as it stands now. But yeah, that it's just going to be a very hard stretch for UCLA. I don't like what I'm seeing right now from the Bruins. Again, 30 points is not the standard you want to set yourself. Against Michigan, what is that? Or Michigan State, what does that tell you? Is UCLA going to lose by 15? Because they're still a top 10 ranked team in the nation, so it's going to be hard to kind of bounce back. And again, it's away at home, and we saw how that kind of affected some of UCLA's players. Obviously, it wasn't the best. If you read my UCLA grades after the Michigan article, you would see that there was a lot of poor performances and poor grades being handed out. But still, there is a lot of chances for UCLA to kind of build their resume, and that's the only thing that is giving UCLA hope to make the tournament right now. We'll see what the bracketology update says, but right now it is not looking pretty for UCLA. But that's all I have today. I really appreciate everyone who made it this far and is listening. It means a lot. And if you guys disagree with any of these overreactions, I'd love to hear anything you'd say, or even the reality part of it too. I would like to hear your guys' input. But that's all I have to say today, guys. And thank you so much. Again, I'm your host, Andrew Ferguson. And as always, fours up and have a good day.